Hi, I'm Todd Muller. I'm a marketing manager at Nestlé Professional. Let me introduce you to Mary and tell you a story about her. Mary is a mother of four, a busy mother of four. One afternoon at 4 o'clock, she got a call saying her in-laws were coming over for dinner that night. Uh-oh. She rushed out to the local deli and found something for dinner that night. It was a hit. Her mother-in-law even asked for the recipe. What was it? Well, Mary called it her lifesaver lasagna. Of course, as we all know, Mary is not alone. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 81% of consumers don't know what they're having for dinner at night. Of course, it's not just dinner either. Meet Ken. He's a busy project manager, and right around the corner from his work is a supermarket. When he's between meetings, rushing on deadlines, he loves to go by the prepared food section and pick out something for lunch. He loves the variety, he loves the quality, he loves the taste. He can get a great tasting meal there. Meet Kelsey. She and her friends on their soccer team are hungry after soccer practice. They love stopping by the deli for some quick fuel up, as well as picking up snacks in the rest of the store for later. They've made a tradition out of it. They call it their Tuesday night fill up. Kelsey, Ken, and Mary were able to find their solution in their unique need state, and they found it at their local grocer. If you want them to bring them back to your department and bring them back again, a key is insights. It all starts with knowing your shoppers. In the prepared foods department, if they find something they like, they'll come back again. So how do we know what it is they like? With Nestlé Professional, we can help make your department a destination. We can help you come through with the delicious meal options that your consumers are looking for when they want them. We can help them live life well fed. What is life well fed? It means at least two things. Convenience. Mary found it convenient when she had to come up with a dinner at the last second. Kelsey found it convenient for her and her friends to get the food they wanted after practice. It also means flavor, great tasting meals. Ken found the variety and the flavors, the cuisines that he was looking for. When it comes to flavor and convenience, people have options. But with the right products, the right atmosphere, and the right insights, you can become their destination. We're committed to helping you grow and helping the channel grow. And I'm really delighted to bring along one of our favorite partners, Jack Lee from Experiential, who's an expert at knowing what consumers want, what shoppers want, what your shoppers are looking for. So they'll come to your department and they'll come back again and again.
Hi, I'm Jack Lee from Experiential, and we're going to share a few tips for success. One of the first things that I'd like you to think about is, who is your competition? Well, imagine, let's say, that you are a grocery store. We will use Kroger in this example. Let's say you are Kroger. The question is, where else can consumers go to shop if they weren't going to shop with you? Where else can they go to get something to eat right away if they weren't going to get it from you? Turns out the average distance from Kroger to, let's say, the next closest Walmart is about 2.8 miles. The average distance from a Kroger to the next closest Publix in areas where they have both stores is about 5.5 miles, and the distance to a Whole Foods is over 10 miles. So you got to drive a little bit of a distance to go and pick one store over another. But there's actually some stuff that's way closer to you than all these other grocery stores. There's many of these things actually, and what are they? Well, the average distance to the next closest Subway is only about a half mile away. To a McDonald's, it's less than a mile away, only 9/10 of a mile. And to a Taco Bell, it's only about a mile and a half. And to a Wendy's, it's less than 2 miles as well. You compete as a grocery store with way more restaurants and convenience stores nearby than you do with other grocery stores. So if we're talking about prepared food, something that someone just wants something to eat, their choice set is not other grocery stores so much as lots and lots of restaurants right in your own backyard. And that's our first lesson, is there's competition everywhere. So when you think about who you're competing with and you think about what's happening nearby, look to restaurants and C-stores as part of that competitive set and think, what can I do that's going to make me a better choice than all these other places someone can go to eat? The second thing we want to talk about is what we call attraction marketing. How do you really build a compelling proposition for the shopper? So one of the things that I think we might be sort of lulled into thinking is that we have a captive audience because there's people already strolling through the aisles of our store. They must be a captive audience. Shouldn't be that hard to get them to come and buy something from the prepared food section. But when you look at the data, we know that that is a wrong way to think. It's sort of a fallacy. And let's take a look. We don't really have a captive audience because if you look at the top reasons that people go to the deli or the prepared food section and check it out, here they are. Number one, I walked past and I was curious. Number two, I walked past and something caught my eye in some way. Number three, these are the top reasons. I walked past and something smelled good. What do all these things have in common? Think about it. These are all things that happened once the person was already in the store and they encountered something that interrupted their shopping experience that made them say, hey, I want to go check that thing out. They didn't come to the store with the preconceived idea that they wanted to stop by the prepared food section. They had to be brought there somehow because of a sensory experience. They saw something, they heard something, they smelled something. That's what got them there. So imagine this. If you ask consumers, what parts of the grocery store do you go to every time you shop at the store? About 2/3 will say, I go to the produce section every single time. It's a habitual place that I visit, habitual part of the store that I go to. But for the prepared food section, that number is only about half. Only about 36% say I try to visit that part of the store each time. So we don't really have a captive audience. We have a lot of shoppers, but only about 1/3 of them are likely to visit the prepared food section unless we give them a reason to. So we think it's not so much about having a captive audience. In fact, we know that you don't really have a captive audience. It's more about captivating the audience by hitting as many of their five senses as you can to bring them over to that part of the store to say, hey, there's something really interesting going on over here, and we're going to assault all five of your senses, and we're going to get you over there, and that visitation rate should go through the roof once you do that. Another thing you might want to think about in how you captivate an audience, captivate that shopper, is what are the things I can do to really make them feel like we know what we're doing with prepared foods and we're really serious about this. And you don't really have to look much further than the restaurant industry and see what they've done. They've done a great job over time with things like menu boards and combo meals and limited time offers, having great product signage, having value menus or displays that really draw people in. These are things that grocers, for the most part, are just started to get going on, and we have a really long ways to go before we catch up with what the restaurant industry has perfected over the past few decades. So let's take a look at that. How do you go about having let's say, a great display in this case? Well, we're in sort of this age of what we call experiential retailing, where the purchasing process, the shopping process itself can be an experience that engages people. You know, shopping is not just about the product that you get at the end. It's about that journey that you take that can be sort of pleasurable too and really get you excited, which will impact the product that you buy at the end. It could be doing a really cool, digital experience for selling shoes. It could be that when you go to Sephora, you get your makeup done in store that engages you with the product. It might be just the way you display seafood at your seafood counter, where it says screams freshness in some way because you have the ice and the handwritten signs. It could be, hey, we're not just selling you these prepackaged snacks and nuts and candies and whatnot. We're going to give you a wall of them to choose from and make it sort of fun and interactive as a shopper. Or we're just going to have an extremely gorgeous display of product that draws you in. So think about your prepared food section. Is it like these interactive experiences? Or do you have that case where maybe there's just that one lonely chicken wing sitting in there that looks like it's been there for 3 weeks and is totally turning shoppers away? How do you have a great, engaging experience for the shopper where that display screams, we know what we're doing? Number 3, and this is an important one, we're going to spend a few minutes and talk about culinary trends, some of the food trends that are driving the food industry forward. And when you think about culinary trends, here's a look at some of the fastest growing ingredients and flavors and foods that you might find on a restaurant menu. Why do we look at restaurant menus? Because we know from thousands of test cases, the things that we researched over time, that trends typically start at restaurants and eventually find their way into retail product. And we have an entire life cycle for this. But if you look at the things that are growing the fastest, and this is the percentage change, this is how much these items have grown on restaurant menus over the past 4 years, the first thing you might notice is that half this list is probably pretty hard to pronounce. And the second is, well, we've highlighted in blue the items that come from some sort of a multicultural origin, what's traditionally been called sort of an ethnic influence of some type. And like 80% of this list of the fastest growing things is blue. They come from some other part of the world in some place. And we can ask ourselves, well, what does that mean for us? Right? Because these are US, American restaurant menus that we're looking at where all these things are sort of exploding all of a sudden. So how do we bring it into the foods that we offer to our customers? Well, do you offer them in a traditional way? Well, it turns out that that's not really the answer. That consumer says we don't want an exact replica of how this dish might be done or how this flavor is executed in this other country. We're more likely to try it if you put it in a familiar application of some sort, so I can not feel like I'm taking as much of a risk on trying something new. We love this picture of this burger, for instance. We think this sums up what modern American food is today. Here's a place called Plan Check, great restaurant in Los Angeles. This is their Korean barbecue burger. And on this burger you have grilled pork belly, you have gochujang barbecue sauce, and you have kimcheese, something they call kimcheese. And think about this, right? If you took these individual ingredients, pork belly, gochujang, and kimchi, and that was your entire dish, no one would ever order that thing. It'd be very scary. They wouldn't know what it is. But you put it on a burger all of a sudden, and it's like, oh, that sounds fantastic. And you accompany it with a great visual or a great display, and now you have something totally unique that people want to try as well, that sets you apart from your competition at the same time, and that brings to bear all these different trends from around the world that we're seeing emerge in modern American food. So we actually have a model that helps us predict what the next big food and flavor trends are going to be. We call it the menu adoption cycle, with a focus on the word menu, because we know that trends start on restaurant menus and then eventually they go to other places. And if you look at this menu adoption cycle, it's pretty simple. There's 4 stages. Every trend moves through a 4-stage life cycle. You start with a stage called inception. This is where a trend typically starts in, let's say, a fine dining restaurant or a really unique ethnic restaurant of some sort. And you see a really, really small thing grow at a very, very fast rate, but typically in just those types of places. Eventually, that trend moves to its second stage of life that we call adoption. This is when restaurants like fast casual restaurants or your favorite gastropub or a higher end casual dining restaurant might jump on that trend. This is when food trucks will jump on that trend. This is also when your really progressive prepared food areas at various grocers might do something with that trend too. So these are still pretty early stage, but they're out of that first stage, they're into the second stage, so we know that they have legs, and we think this is where a lot of the American consumer appetite is shifting, is into that second stage that we call adoption. The third stage is proliferation. Now that trend is familiar, The risk has been sucked out of it because people know what it is. You don't really have to explain it or teach people about that food so much anymore because they are familiar with it already. It shows up at chain restaurants. It shows up in mainstream prepared food areas at various grocery stores. And it's popular, but it's also not quite as unique anymore. And then finally, you have ubiquity, where basically that trend is everywhere. There's no risk involved anymore, but a lot of the reward is gone too, because it's literally every place you can imagine. And if we look at maybe how it works, we picked out just 2 examples of different flavors in each of those 4 stages. So in that first stage, inception, we have gochujang, which is a Korean sauce, and togarashi, which is a Japanese 7-spice. They're both growing really fast at restaurants, specifically in higher end restaurants and places that do more progressive cuisine, but they're still largely unknown to most consumers today. So they're in that first inception stage trend. In adoption, we have chimichurri and arrabbiata, which are known a bit better, but still not familiar to a majority of consumers. And then as we continue to move along the trend cycle, we have things that become more and more familiar. In proliferation, it's habanero and wasabi, and in ubiquity, it's pesto and barbecue sauce, stuff that everybody knows. But these are just 2 out of hundreds, if not thousands of different trends that are happening as we speak, or as you listen or watch right now. And by thinking about where each one of those foods and flavors and health trends exists along that 4-stage life cycle, you can start picking the spots where your brand wants to play. Do you want to offer things at a really early stage in inception where it's your job to educate the shopper too? Or do you want to focus just on those ubiquity flavors that require no education and it's just a matter of doing those things really well to separate you from the competition? That's a decision that you have to make. Okay, another thing to remember when you think about these 4 stages is that the trends in those first 2 stages, inception and adoption, these are things that really generate excitement, right? These are things that are newer. They're going to get people coming by. We saw that one of the reasons that people visit the deli or the prepared food section is because, something caught their eye or they were curious about something. These are the types of trends that sort of create that behavior. But it's those last 2 stages, proliferation and ubiquity, that's the stuff that creates all the volume. You're going to sell more of those. And what we would generally recommend is pick where your brand is comfortable along this cycle, and then find ways you can combine things from multiple parts of the cycle. So you might have a ubiquitous type of an item, right? Something like, let's say, a mac and cheese, for instance, that everybody loves. But then you could borrow flavors from that adoption stage and put it into the mac and cheese, or whatever it might be, to create something that's unique, interesting, but also has a built-in audience. And that's a great way to go forward. So what we'd like to do is maybe walk around, travel around the globe a little bit, and talk about some, just a few of the different multicultural influences that we think are going to continue to drive food forward for the next several years. So in Asia, Korean barbecue is on fire. It's grown 80%, almost 80% on menus. Over 1/3 of consumers say they've now tried Korean barbecue. It's in that adoption stage, which we think is great. And take a look at bulgogi as well. Fantastic dish, also a Korean dish, also up almost 80% on restaurant menus. Not just at Korean places, but restaurant menus in America as a whole, it's grown that much. About 1 in 7 consumers these days say they've actually tried it already, and we think that number is only going to continue to grow. How about Latin American influences? There's a lot over here, right? Adobo sauce, up 21% on menus. Over 1/4 of consumers say they've tried it at this point. Again, a number that we know, because we can predict these things using that cycle, is going to continue to grow. Chorizo, right? It's been around for a long time. It's actually sort of ubiquitous in a way. You could go into a lot of breakfast places and you can get chorizo in your breakfast burrito or an omelet, for instance, but it's still growing, up 17% on menus. Almost 1/2 of consumers have tried it at this point. That means there's still a half that haven't tried it at this point, and we think more of them will as time goes on, if you look at what the trend curve looks like for chorizo. Carnitas, up 17%. 40% of consumers have tried carnitas at this point. We think that will become a majority number in the future. Poblano as a flavor, as a pepper, as a flavor, grown 80% on restaurant menus over the past few years, and over 1/3 of consumers are familiar with poblano at this point. And then we have another part of the world that we think is going to drive a lot of future menu innovation and food innovation and flavor innovation for America. So we talked about Asian, we talked about Latin American. The big sort of emerging global cuisine trend in the US is a third category, and that's Mediterranean. It's just starting to take off now, and we think it's going to have a lot of legs, right? I mean, that looks delicious. Who would not want to have a feast like this? So let's look at a few things, right? Falafel, been around for a long time, familiar to a number of people already. It's grown 45% on menus. So this is a simple item that a lot of people already have familiarity with, and it's growing, but it's just the first in a long beat of many items. How about sumac? Do you know what sumac is? It is a spice that's used in Middle Eastern cuisine, often in Persian cuisine. It's grown over 100% on restaurant menus at some of the great fine dining places in this country, places that are doing some really interesting new foods and flavors. Look to incorporate some of these types of things that hail from the Middle East. Labneh, it's sort of a Lebanese yogurt dipping sauce, grown over 45% on restaurant menus over the past few years. Tahini, often a component for making a great hummus, for instance, but by itself, it's also grown over 40% on menus. Za'atar, are you familiar with za'atar? It's earlier, it's in that inception stage of its life cycle, and has grown a whopping 300% on restaurant menus. So still very small, but growing at a very, very fast rate. So a lot of different things to play with, and specifically when we got to maybe some of those more recent ones that we just looked at, za'atar and sumac, you might say, well, maybe my customers are not totally ready for that yet. So the way you want to approach that is, can you take these types of flavors and put them in something that is familiar to the customer? It's that burger example we looked at a little while ago, that Korean barbecue burger, and make it feel safe, that it's experimental because there's new flavors there, but there's a level of safety that's baked into it as well. And we call that principle safe experimentation. From a culinary perspective, there's only one thing that you're going to remember from this video. It's safe experimentation is where you want to play to create stuff that is really unique and exciting, but also has a large audience. And I'm going to show you just a really quick example of how this works. So one thing we do is we test food with consumers, ideas about food, food dishes themselves, and we test a lot of it. You know, tens of thousands of different items we have consumers rate, and they tell us what they think about them. And let's say you imagine this item over here, this dish, salsa verde poutine, cheese curds, green salsa verde, tomatoes, scallions, and finished with guajillo chili peppers. And two of the things that we'll look at when we present an item like this to consumers is how likely are you to order or to purchase this item, and how unique do you think this item is? So let's see how salsa verde poutine, described as it's described here, did with consumers. In this case, we asked 500 people, what do you think of this dish? And let's look at another dish that we're going to compare it to. Mexican loaded fries. Golden crisp fries topped with cheese curds, green salsa verde, made with roasted tomatillos and peppers, tomatoes, green onions, and topped with sweet and smoky guajillo chili peppers. Now, if you are an astute viewer, you would recognize that that second dish, Mexican loaded fries, is basically the exact same dish as the salsa verde poutine, just described with slightly more familiar language. Does that language have an impact on people's likelihood to buy the product? So that's the big question. So we've had 500 people rate the first product, salsa verde poutine, and we had a separate 500 people rate that second product, Mexican loaded fries, and let's see what happens. So we're going to look at purchase intent, which is PI. We're going to look at uniqueness and see how consumers rated these two items. So the salsa verde poutine On basically a scale from 0 to 100, where 100 is like the best item of all time and a 0 is like the least popular item ever, scores a 6. Not very good. On a 100-point scale, 6 ain't great. But on uniqueness, it does really well. It scores a 90. So you have an item that people say, wow, this is really unique, but not a lot of people say they're going to order it. Then we look at the Mexican loaded fries, which is literally the exact same dish, just described with different language. And there the purchase intent shoots up to a 68. We didn't change the recipe. We didn't change the product. We just changed how it's described. And the uniqueness is still just as strong as before at a 96 in this case. This is an example of safe experimentation at work, that we've taken something that's new and different, but described it in a way that consumers can relate to and understand. We took the unfamiliar words and we sort of put them more in the description of the item than on the name of the item, so we don't scare anybody away, and they get to have something that's really delicious that they're not scared to try. So I wanted to wrap up real quick with just a couple of points to take home with you. One, there's competition everywhere. Your competition is not just other grocery stores and other delis. It's the entire world of restaurants and convenience stores, many of which are right around the corner from you. Two, you can't just assume a captive audience. You have to captivate your audience with great displays, great signage, and to assault all 5 of their senses. 3, and you think about ethnic food, don't think of it as ethnic food. Think of ethnic food as American food these days. That the fastest growing things on menus in the US are things that come from other parts of the world, but they're applied in a way that makes them familiar to consumers. That menu adoption cycle, think of anything you might consider adding along those 4 life stages: inception, adoption, proliferation, and ubiquity, and figure out where you want to play along that life cycle. And finally, safe experimentation. You want something that's going to be new and different, but you want something that is also familiar to the consumer, that feels safe, so they don't get too scared away. And if you do all these things, we think you're going to have a very successful business. Okay, so now Chef Ryan from Nestlé Professional is here to show you how you can turn some of these learnings into actions. Great food that is food service at retail ready. Chef Ryan?
Hi, my name is Ryan Baxter. I am Director of National Account Chefs with Nestlé Professional. You know, as Jack spoke about, one of the ways to introduce flavors into menus is through a concept called safe experimentation. That's a way to take something that is very familiar, in this case, mac and cheese, and infuse it with flavors that are on trend, which give our customers opportunities to do a little bit more experimentation. Today we're going to show you a few ways to show these products in a variety of different applications for different kinds of operations that you have, with some with a little bit of labor and some with much more labor. So why don't we begin? In our first example, we're going to take the Stouffer's white cheddar mac and cheese, which again is a ready-to-eat product, and we're going to show it in a very simple application for any skill level in your operation. As a matter of fact, we take this product and we're going to transfer it into a bowl based on the portion size that is appropriate for your business. I'm going to do one example here, and we're going to take that product and we're going to take the Miner's Fire Roasted Poblano product. Again, a ready-to-eat product, and because the mac and cheese is ready to eat and the Miner's Fire Roasted product is ready to eat, this is really a product that can be produced and put directly into either a cold case or being used for a grab and go. So I'm going to take a small amount of this Fire Roasted Poblano, and it really is amount based on flavor and recipes that you develop or that we help you develop, and we're going to mix that product. This is really important because, as Jack said in his presentation, we take something familiar and we add ethnic twist ingredients like this Fire Roasted Poblano. And Fire Roasted Poblano is very much on trend. As a matter of fact, we produce here at Miner's several ready-to-eat products that are really great for adding flavor to your menus. For example, there is a roasted jalapeno, there is a roasted garlic, a sun-dried tomato, a red chili adobo, as just a few examples of some of the products that we make. Those can also be used for these very same applications. So after doing that and adding that fire roasted mixture, I'm going to add this to a nice container here. And again, portion size will be based on your recipes. And then to finish this dish, we have a little bit of toasted panko breadcrumbs, which I'm just going to sprinkle on top. They give a nice crunchy texture to the final product. And then we put on a lid, and this product is ready to go for your cold case or your grab and go in your operations. So in this next example, in your operations that have more opportunity to do some additional labor and skill in those operations, we have a product here called Mexican street corn mac and cheese. And it's a great way to tie in ethnic flavors with, again, a little bit more complexity, a little bit more effort, but a greater opportunity to sell those products to a greater degree. So in this case, we're going to take some of that Stouffer's white cheddar mac and cheese, and we're going to, again, put it into a bowl. And I'm preparing this dish today as a hot item, but this dish could easily be prepared as a fully cold dish and served either in your cold case or your grab and go. But I personally think this is an opportunity to take this dish and serve it as a hot side dish for a grab and go, say with your roasted chicken, right? Chicken is the #1 seller, and if we could get some additional sales out of selling an upscale side dish along with that chicken, we increase those check averages. So I've taken this product here, and just to give you an idea what the starting point is, you see some of the ingredients here on the table. This is a dish based on sort of Mexican flavors, right? So street corn is very common in Mexico. This is roasted corn off the kernel. Here's some Spanish chorizo, and then you have some flavoring elements like cilantro, a little bit of cotija cheese, which is a sharp cheese, very common in Mexico, similar to Parmesan. And then we have some garlic, cumin, we have chili ancho, and some chopped jalapenos or poblanos, either one that you like, right? I've also made a beautiful fresh side dish of avocado, beautiful fresh cues that customers really love. That's going to be a garnish. So let's show you how we can put that together. So we put that mac and cheese into a container, and then earlier I took this mixture, the corn and the chorizo and the onions, and we heated it up, and I'm going to add that to this Stouffer's white mac and cheese. And again, the ratios really are based on your operations and your price points, but we're going to use some of this, going to add that great flavor to that. I think that's about enough. And we're going to mix this. So as you can see, this really changes this dish. This takes a very familiar product, the Stouffer's white mac and cheese, and adds these really interesting on-trend flavor elements. Doesn't that look delicious? I love chorizo. It's one of my favorites. So after mixing it, we're going to put that to the side, and we're going to take a bowl that we've set aside, and we're going to fill that bowl. I think I'm going to have this for my lunch right now. That looks delicious. And then to finish this dish, borrowing from restaurant-style approach, we're going to take this avocado salsa and put that's that twist that we've been talking about. So this little bit of this fresh avocado salsa, and then to finish it, we're going to do two things. We're going to take a little bit of cotija cheese, that Mexican cheese that I mentioned, and then a small amount of chopped cilantro, and we have Mexican street corn mac and cheese, taking a familiar item, adding a twist, adding a little more complexity, a great grab and go hot case or cold case option for your operations. Hi, in our third and final demonstration, we're going to show an operation that may have lots of labor, lots of opportunity for chefs to be able to create for your customers. And as a matter of fact, we have what we're calling a custom made to order mac and cheese station. This is a great opportunity to highlight products that are in your stores, and it's a great opportunity to utilize products as an exit strategy, right? Those things that really need to be used so that food costs can be maintained at the correct levels. So we're going to show you some products today that are very commonly found in a fast casual restaurant, right? Or any of the restaurants really that are around your area. And so it's an opportunity for customers to come up, see the ingredients, and make some choices. We're going to show you 3 items today that are varied in their use and their application. So the first one we're going to do is a very on-trend Korean-influenced dish using some roast pork. As a matter of fact, this pork was taken from some spare ribs that needed to be used, and were something that really we want to continue to be able to sell. So We simply cleaned up those spare ribs a little bit, got rid of all the cartilage in the bone. I'm going to put a little bit of that roast pork spare ribs in the pot. I'm going to take a little bit of our Stouffer's white mac and cheese, going to add that. And imagine your customer is there, they're smelling this, they're hearing the sizzle, they're excited, they're making choices about what they're going to be able to choose. Customers love customization, they really do. So to that dish we're going to add a flavor that really makes it Korean, something that's called gochujang, right? And gochugaru is actually the name of this, right? You may see that sometimes around on TV. It's one of those ethnic flavors that are based on the same chili that's used to make kimchi, if you're familiar with that. So this is a flavor that, again, as was said earlier by Jack, we have the familiar elements, but we're adding the twist elements, and we're adding the ethnic elements as well. And on top of that, we're utilizing ingredients that would otherwise maybe not be used. Great for our exit strategy, right? So I'm going to heat this a little bit, and as you can see, it does not take a lot of time to finish. We're going to take that dish, and again, the customer's right in front of us. Hot, fresh, fragrant, on-trend, beautiful dish of roasted pork, Korean-influenced roasted pork with Stouffer's white mac and cheese. A garnish of that could be just a couple of scallions, and we have our first example. A second example would be, again, same exact approach, right? So let's say a customer had an urging and they love seafood. So we have some seafood, again, possibly used from other parts in our store. In this case, it's some cooked shrimp that could easily come from the deli area. We have some steamed, beautiful Maine lobster, right? An expensive ingredient, one that we could charge some additional monies for, increase that check average. We're going to put that together. And in this case, we had some asparagus because they were in season, and they're beautiful, fresh asparagus that were cooked off. We're going to add some asparagus to that. And again, these are the tips and some of the segments of the asparagus. These are some classical combinations of ingredients. Now remember, you could put almost anything you want in here. We could easily put these pearl onions that you see here. Some mushrooms would work really well, some chives. It really varies based on what the customer might want or what's in season at that point. We're going to take some of the Stouffer's white mac and cheese, and we're going to do that same thing here that we did a moment ago. We're going to put some mac and cheese. And if you go to any upscale restaurant, you are going to find a lobster mac and cheese potentially on their menu. Very much an opportunity to find in a restaurant. Really, really something you see commonly. So why not do it in our store? So this here, it only takes a couple of seconds. We're going to heat this till it gets to the proper temperature. I'm going to put a small amount of some parsley in there for some color. Look at that beautiful mixture. And our lobster, shrimp, mac and cheese is done. We're going to plate it. Again, customers right in front of us. They've made choices. They've picked their favorite ingredients. We've used products that are in our stores, and we bring an upscale mac and cheese to our customer. I always like to finish this with a little bit of that shrimp or lobster showing right at the top. That's important. So there's our second mac and cheese, lobster and shrimp mac and cheese. And then for our third one, many of our customers these days are asking for healthier, right? We love indulgent, but we also like healthier, right? So one of the ways to get healthier is to give them some things that while they still have some richness, right? Mac and cheese is certainly a rich item. We can do a vegetable-based one, which is something that many, many customers are asking for. So in this case, we're going to do essentially the same idea. We're going to take some of this beautiful butternut squash that we cooked off earlier in the day that's been fully cooked. We're also going to take some kale, right? Kale is one of those ingredients that continues to be very popular, high in antioxidants, great for us, something our customers really love. We're going to put some of that there. And the flavoring element here is going to be the Miner's red chili adobo. This is that classical, this is that I should say, that ingredient that is a bit of a twist, right? Customers may not be that familiar with it, but they would potentially experiment with this because it's something that they're willing to try. We're going to put a little bit of this inside there. It doesn't take a lot. These are concentrated flavors. And then we're going to take, again, our Stouffer's white mac and cheese. And as you can see, very easy to prepare. in a store, and we're going to warm that a little bit. And you'll notice that that red chili adobo will add some beautiful color and some beautiful chili flavor to this, complementing those vegetables very nicely. And our goal here is just to warm this through just for a minute or two. I'm going to turn that up a little bit. Looks delicious. Get some nice steam coming off. This dish is ready. And so to finish this, again, the same way, we're going to take this vegetable mac and cheese with kale and butternut squash and some Miner's red chili adobo. And we're going to plate it restaurant style right in front of the customer for a custom made to order, chef inspired macaroni and cheese bar. So as we've seen, this idea of safe experimentation can be used very successfully to take a familiar product and infuse it with on-trend flavors to give a customer something more exciting. As a matter of fact, these examples can be used in almost any kind of operation where there is lots of labor opportunity, or where there is very little. As a matter of fact, these are great ideas for your cold case, your hot case, your grab and go, or as we just saw, an example where you have a full custom made to order station.